Good afternoon. We are going to get started here in just a moment or two. My name is Ben Goldberg, and we're here with Advantage Club, and we are going to be talking about Recession-Proof, your 2023 employee engagement strategy. It is currently about 12:01. We'll get started in about 1 minute, so just stand by as we allow more and more guests to join the webinar. Thank you for attending. I'm seeing people just signing in here, so we'll just give another minute as people are attending, and we'll get started. All right, we are at 12:02, so we might as well go ahead and get started. I'm sure more people will be signing in as we get started, but everybody's here on time. Thank you very much. Again, this is Recession-Proof, your 2023 employee engagement strategy. We are going to be having a webinar today along with panelists to share some of their insights and guidance based upon what they've experienced in 2023. Throughout the presentation, we will have this displayed with a PowerPoint presentation and full screen. So make sure that when you are looking at the screen, you should be able to see the presentation now with the speakers in a small box. If not, go ahead and adjust your settings so that you can see the full screen. After the presentation, we will send out the presentation to everybody so that they can get a copy of this. That way you don't have to take crazy notes, and we'll make sure that we get that to you. In addition, we'll follow up with a call to answer any questions that you have. Throughout the presentation, there is a question section, so feel free to ask questions and we will get your questions answered throughout the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our moderator today, Matt Willis. He is Senior Vice President of Advantage Club and guides organizations across many specific topics, including innovative engagement strategies. Prior to joining Advantage Club, Matt led multiple divisions at CareerBuilder and Broadbean Technology supporting talent acquisition. He's a graduate of University of Colorado Law School and Northwestern University Kellogg School of Business. Matt has focused his entire career on human resources to support at a strategic level. Matt, thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Really excited to have everyone here today. Hopefully we have a lot of info for you quickly. I'm just going to go over some quick guide rules here so that you can get the most out of this time together. Number one is we have set this up so that we have statistics. We have a lot of changes going on in today's workforce. So we've got the relevant trends and stats regarding kind of the employment engagement space. That'll be about 6 or 7 slides. We're going to have comments from our great panelists today, which I'll introduce. And then after that, we're going to talk about kind of 2 ideas. And one is establishing employee needs. And there's some thoughts around what we're seeing in terms of feedback today. And then recognizing and creating this kind of recognition culture. So that's our setup. Inevitably, we have a wide variety of folks on the call, large companies, small companies, government. And if you have individual questions or want a copy of this presentation, we will email out your opportunity. If you want to opt in, we will send that out to you. If you also have individual questions that weren't covered today, certainly that's an opportunity. And we've got some experts in the field that can talk about what we're seeing in your particular industry or segment. So with that, want to start today. I will be the moderator. I will be sharing our experience. Advantage Club is 100 countries. We have 3 million users. We are not well known in North America because we haven't branded ourselves in North America, but we are the underbelly of big divisions like some of the folks here from Accenture and EY, Target, H&M. We provide rewards, recognition, and the platform behind that. So we'll have some insights on what our clients are seeing. More importantly, we have two great panelists. First, we have Dennis Garcia. And as we do these 6 or 7 panels each year, we ask the audience, and I'd encourage you all to provide feedback when you hear from us on what you want to see. And what we've heard is we've got a lot of senior HR leaders, business leaders here today. People have asked us, hey, we hear from HR, but we'd love to hear from the business side. And so today we have small enterprise, Lisa Schrader, larger enterprise, Dennis Garcia. Dennis has a long and prosperous career, started with IBM and then Accenture and with Microsoft. Within Microsoft, Dennis is the assistant general counsel, and Microsoft is unique in that not only is that division or department very large, but it is a very high functioning group, an award-winning group within Microsoft. Furthermore, Dennis can speak to what Microsoft does in terms of some of the situations we're seeing today. And in addition, Dennis serves on many boards, can speak to what he's seeing from clients, etc. In addition to Dennis, we have Lisa Schrader. Lisa is the Chief Operating Officer of Luminary Media. They own podcasts and several large shows, including Dave Chappelle's show. Before that, Lisa was senior leadership with Uber. And before that, Lisa had a long career as a senior leader, both with the Daily as well as the Emmanuel mayors for the city of Chicago. In particular, Lisa was the chief operating officer, then chief of staff, workforce of 80,000 people and a small budget of only around $18 billion for the city. So between both of them, we should have a very lively and neat panel to talk about what's happening in this hybrid world of ours and how we're addressing engagement. Next, Eric. Thanks. Okay, so let's look at the workforce changes. We're not going to get into depth here because most everyone knows most of these trends, right? We had pre-pandemic, the big trends in employee engagement were really, hey, this emphasis on the Gen Z. We had 4 generations coming up. So now all of a sudden we're looking at, hey, culture is important to me if I'm going to join your organization. I'm looking at work-life balance. I'm looking at wellness benefits. That was rising pre-pandemic. And in addition to that, we have this pandemic that occurs. And really, it turns everything upside down in terms of the playbook for how we were thinking about employee engagement. So we have great resignation, we have a tighter job market, and then we get a really, really tight job market. Even with recession, very, very tight today, we have a hybrid workplace, and we've all heard and seen the challenges there. In addition to that, we have this silent quitting or this idea of disengagement or career cushioning. Folks that are contemplating other areas of work. And today the numbers range from anywhere from 60 to 70% of the US workforce is disengaged on some level. And what we've seen out of that, well, all of a sudden, it's up at the CEO level, the executive level. HR becomes much, much more important. How we're retaining people, how we're getting people in. So there's an HR tech boom. Next. And when I say HR tech boom, in 2019, 2020, the hottest segment for venture capital funding has been HR tech. Heard at a conference in the last 25 years, pre-pandemic, there was little or no innovation around HR technology. Come the pandemic, all of a sudden we're in a crisis for talent. There's a huge boom. So now we have different parts of the life cycle being automated. We have joint interactions between different technologies, and we have a lot more data and a lot more analytics that our executive teams are aware of. Next. Enter 2023. So in the Q4 2022, we started to hear rumblings, right? We have a recession in the works, or we were at recession, depending on where you were talking to and who you're talking to. What does that mean? It means today we're in the thick of it. Yesterday, Indeed laid off people. Today, it's Accenture. We have now this dual set of data. One set of data says, hey, I want a sense of belonging. I want the sense of recognition. I want to be appreciated. We know we have to provide that for employees, but we're starting to see in the last month economic insecurity. So people that are feeling that insecurity about their jobs, or the survivor syndrome. And what I mean by survivor syndrome is, hey, there was a 10% layoff. I'm still at the organization, but will other layoffs come? Or am I in the right area? So a very much a scramble, whether or not people are laid off. For those survivors, how do we protect our top 70% or 80% or 50%? And so we're seeing this acceleration of kind of engagement efforts. Next. Okay. And then just to codify this is from Gallup, and it was also from American Workforce Management. 52% of employees are concerned with the economy, how it'll affect their job, and up to 52%, especially in the category 18 to 24, are concerned about losing their job. In that same survey, we still have 61% of employees that won't accept a job that would impact the work-life balance. So how do we balance today these competing factors? So I'm going to stop right there just for a second, and I want to talk to our panelists. Hybrid workplace, how is that going? And can you tell us, before we get to the layoffs, how you've individually dealt with, or what you've seen from your vantage point with clients, et cetera? We'll go ahead and ask Lisa first.
Thanks, Matt. We so my company Luminary, we are a smaller company, and we once the pandemic hit, actually moved to 100% work from home, which was a massive change from we had an office in New York, we had a small office in Chicago, and everyone was used to working, and it was it was a tech-based entertainment platform. So it was, there were no offices. It was tables with people sitting right across from each other, very much in-person, collaborative environment. And so flipping instantly to an at-home work environment was a challenge. And so, initially we started to do things like, let's do a Friday happy hour where people can, virtually be on the call and just kind of unload about the week and have a drink if you wanted to. And so some of those things were helpful. We did some of those things around the holidays as well. But like most companies, we've also been impacted by the, external economic forces. And so we have had some layoffs. And so we've been also dealing with this employees wanting to be engaged, seeing some colleagues laid off, and that very much that uncertainty about what their future was. And so part of how we kept our employees together, and it differs with a smaller company versus a larger one like where Dennis is, but we were very transparent about where the company's finances, where we saw, and when we had to take actions, we would say, here's what we're doing today. We can tell you that we're not going to be doing anything else for another 6 months, so we would give people certainty, which we had the flexibility to do at a small company, about what the near-term road looked like. And quite frankly, we had folks leave, and so we were still hiring during that time, and we would be transparent about what the road ahead looked like as well. So that, I think, provided people some comfort to deal with that survivor syndrome of being worried about what was happening. But again, that's flexibility that we had as a small company that publicly traded companies might not have. But we worked very hard to try to keep folks engaged, and asking people to put cameras on when they could, knowing that not everyone can have a camera on all the time. And then we couldn't do company holiday gatherings anymore, so we did try to get people together once a year in New York, just to get eyes on folks and have a real human connection, as opposed to what we were doing most days in the workplace. So we've been learning as we go, just like most companies, but we found things that worked, and we continue to try to do those.
Yeah. And, just from my perspective as an attorney at Microsoft, I mean, there's no doubt there's been a lot of change over the past few years, right? And we know this sort of notion that the only constant is change, or we're going to see more change. But, when the pandemic hit, our lawyers and legal professionals who are based in our headquarters in Redmond, Washington, I think there was a lot of change they needed to embrace, because they were used to going into our offices every single day, seeing each other, collaborating. For myself as an attorney in our field operations, supporting our sales, marketing, and other technology professionals, many of us were already accustomed to working in a hybrid or remote format. So for many of the Microsoft employees based in the field, whether they were part of our legal team or our salespeople, they were already accustomed to working in sort of a virtual, hybrid, or remote fashion. So I would say that, at least initially in the pandemic, in terms of changing our ways of working, for folks in the field, it wasn't that big of a change versus folks who were based in our corporate headquarters. And of course, working at Microsoft, all of us have been accustomed to using Microsoft Teams. So we were already using that technology for such a long period of time prior. So while there was change, we were accustomed to using the underlying technology for us to connect with our customers and for each other. But, there's no doubt when you look, a few years ago with the rise of the pandemic, I think there was also a notion of a technology boom, if you will, right? Where Microsoft and a lot of other technology companies were actively hiring folks, right? We needed more folks to come to serve our customers and our partners. So we saw a period of time where there was what I would call a proverbial war of talent, to bring in newly talented folks, to onboard them, which is difficult to do in a remote fashion, right? So that you create a sense of a team and camaraderie. I think one thing which we learned is that you need to be very purposeful, right? As managers and leaders, how do you periodically check in with your teammates and help them and support them? You need to be more purposeful in this hybrid remote environment. And, sort of fast forwarding to the current time, I mean, no doubt that we're experiencing lots of economic headwinds, right? It's going to be interesting to see how things move forward. Microsoft a few months ago, back in January, did announce layoffs. A number of other technology companies have also announced layoffs as well. So, there's no doubt there is some anxiety in the system, if you will. I think with our employees, quite frankly, we see some anxiety and concerns with some of our customers and partners as well. But, at least from my perspective, what I've learned during my time in corporate America is you need to continue to think about how do you drive really good value with your clients and your teammates and collaborating with them. And, what we like to say is, don't be so concerned with the noise and what's going on, right? Focus on your job, focus on providing value, focus on serving your clients, your customers and partners, and trying to move forward. And, during these times where we have seen, folks leave, companies and folks who are left here in many respects need to do more, perhaps with fewer resources. You need to work smarter, if you will. So we have also seen a big focus in more relentless prioritization of our work, right? We may not have those same sorts of resources or budgets that we had a year ago or 2 or 3 years ago. So how do we think about doing a better job at prioritizing the work we do. I know from a legal department perspective, how do we try to free up time using automation or self-help resources with our clients to do more mission critical work? So we've been focused a lot on this notion of how do we work smarter? How do we prioritize our work and provide hopefully the greatest impact to our clients?
Great.
I just want to add one thing to what Dennis said. I think if I'm not slowing up the presentation too much, I think you're exactly right, Dennis. This idea of keeping focused on the work, and for us, it's our customers. We have subscribers to our content, and they expect, they're paying for our service, and they have expectations, and that's really why we're here. And so to keep a focus on what we're all doing here and what the work is and why you were interested in working at a place like this in the first place. That is really critical. And I also think it's about communicating clearly to employees about what the work is and what it isn't, and not to overpromise. We all have a job to do. We have responsibilities. We need to, demand high performance from our employees while, making sure that they are recognized for their good work. That's super important. And we also, need to understand that they're human beings, and so a lot of this, I know, Dennis, we talked about this before. A lot of this is about managers, right? And making sure that managers understand human beings and how to manage them, and creating clear expectations. And because at the end of the day, a job can't be everything. It is part of who you are. It cannot deliver a lot of those things in life that maybe you would like it to. And so it's just important to be clear about what we're doing, why we're here, and how we can best work together to deliver on that. So.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. When I think about it too, there's this great book out there written by Amy Edmondson, who's a Harvard business professor. It's called The Fearless Organization. And she gets into a fair amount of detail about this notion of psychological safety. How do you earn the trust of your employees? How do you develop deeper psychological safety with them? I think as leaders, we need to think about how do we develop that closeness and that connection, that psychological safety, and earn the trust of our employees. It takes time to do that, and to be able to develop that psychological safety nowadays is more important than ever before. And as leaders, obviously, we play a big role in that. As leaders, I think also during these tougher economic times, I think it's important for us to portray a notion of optimism, positivity moving forward, that we'll get through this. We'll get through this together. Asking our teammates just to try to do the best you can, right? During this, making sure that they're focused on their wellness and their well-being. They're taking time off. They're taking their vacation time. Hopefully they're taking real vacation so they can come back and be recharged to come back to the workplace. But I think the other point you made is so important. I've seen this in my career. A lot of us may define ourselves by virtue of our jobs in our careers. And our jobs and our careers are very important. But I think you have to be careful not to let your job and your role to define yourself, right? You got to say, when I think of myself, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, that's what's most important in my life. My job's very important. My career is very important. But myself, that's sort of my identity. My job should not be my identity.
Absolutely. I've always said my job, and particularly I had a career in politics and government. It's very much part of who I am, but it is not my identity. I have, and I think we can talk about what is, clearly out there, certainly post-pandemic, a real mental health crisis that's happening, particularly with young people. And so there's a lot of searching for where can I find that that piece that's going to help make me feel a little more sturdy. If we do it right as managers and employers, work is going to be a positive piece of the puzzle, but it cannot be the full puzzle, right? And so I'm 100% with you, Dennis.
I love this, and we have about 2 or 3 webinars springing out of this, but we're gonna keep on a few more stats, and I think we've already jumped ahead on a couple of them. So appreciate the rich responses. If we can go on to the next. So what we're seeing out there too is, just to codify, employee experience is now top of mind at the board. And what I mean by that is, HBR just came out with 71% of top executives rank employee engagement as a key to business success. That's way up. And Ernst & Young, if you look at the chart here, you can see that this is just 2 years ago. Today, it's almost 90% of top executives think that employee experience is really critical. Next slide. And we just want to bring this up. I know this is small, but I want to key in on, what is this disengagement stat? Well, the disengagement stat, and this is a lot of new information just this year, is that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 32% of employees are engaged. Well, what does that mean? That they are doing their work, but also communicating, with their peers, are engaged and self-profess that they are engaged in work. So that means 2/3 in some organizations are not as engaged. A lot of that has to do from work at home, but also the layoffs certainly affected the anxiety around that. And we all know that disengagement, you can see multiple different studies, lower productivity, lower sense of commitment to your job, and as a result, higher turnover. Conversely, we see this idea of the turnover stats. So what we have today is one of the tightest job markets we've had in the last 25 years. And the reason is, not only do we have this post-pandemic bandwidth issue as things came online, but we also had the Great Resignation and the silent quitting, et cetera. So today, it's over $4,800 on an average to hire an employee. That's entry level, that's hourly, that's the whole basis. So that has been skyrocketing up. It's much harder to get new people in the door for a lot of jobs. And even with the layoffs, that does impact specific verticals. But as a whole, we're still seeing high disengagement and high turnover. Next. The converse is true, right? So high engagement delivers a lot, and there's a premium on that today. So this came out from Vertex Ventures just a couple of weeks ago, 17% more productivity, customer ratings, more sales, less absenteeism. And interestingly enough, there was a study out of Yale, 21% more profitable companies if you have highly engaged employees. So makes sense. Next slide. Okay, so let's get into just 2 topics here. We've got about 25 minutes or so. One is identifying employee needs, and we've touched on this just from our panel. But how do we walk this balance between, hey, here's your job description, and here's what you need to do, but also identifying, hey, we have 4 different generations working for us today, and we do have different needs and wants of individuals. So if we go to the next slide, we are seeing, going back to the basics, this idea of, hey, what's the hierarchy of needs, right? And most of us have seen this Maslow hierarchy. And we know at the very beginning level, at the start level, this would be our employees that may be independent contractors, they may be hourly, they may be temporary. And most employers at that level provide little or no sense of belonging, well-being, long-term security. And those individuals that are part-time or hourly, very disengaged. I'm there, I'm going to get my paycheck, I'm going to leave. As we go up that level, you now have maybe similar hourly employees or seasonal employees or temporary employees, but we're doing some things for these employees. There is an onboarding process. There is some training. There is some leadership or development. And with those steps becomes a little more engagement and or facilitating or creating ways for the employee to become more engaged. As we do more things and then we incorporate our employees that then become on board, and we have, we explain the job description. We spend a lot of time on the hire process. Then we're going to go in and explain, hey, here's your team and here's how it functions. Here's your manager. We set up some priorities. By the way, we have benefits. By the way, we're going to do your health benefits. And in addition to that, we give you some PTO. And all of a sudden we create this employee that is likely to be more engaged. And you can see how the hierarchy goes. So if we create those optimal avenues for identifying the needs and what makes this employee, what is going to motivate this employee, what makes this employee tick, both through leadership and management, as well as organizational structure, right? That's going to be our optimal engagement. Next. What the trends are is we are seeing new ways to score. So we saw the HR tech, everyone's investing in technologies. One of the big technologies we're seeing is, hey, what's your eNPS score? And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it's your employee net promoter score. How likely is it that the employee is going to recommend a friend to work for your organization? So that's new post-pandemic. We haven't seen that crop up as much. And we're seeing things in different titles, but the happiness surveys. Or we're seeing employee satisfaction surveys, but we're seeing them come out more often. We're seeing more actionable items. We're seeing employee resource groups around these. So we're getting much more quantitative feedback in different ways we can survey. Okay, so that's what we're seeing on the quantitative side. Next. On the qualitative side, this really goes to what Dennis and Lisa were talking about. Hey, how do we get that feedback? So what we're seeing globally across all of our businesses, a few buckets, and then I'll open up to the panel. Employee groups. Now, this can be done a couple different ways. We see communities, we're creating committees for people that are interested in volunteering, diversity committees, leadership committees, training, but also these employee resource group that do not involve the executive team or the management. Hey, let's go talk about diversity. Let's create a ERG around that. Second thing we're saying or seeing out there is what we touched on earlier. The training, different forms of training. How do we deal with the hybrid workplace? How do we expand one-on-ones? Where do we get in the development questions? And how do we elicit feedback, whether it's from your direct manager or otherwise? So we're seeing a number of things like executive coffee chats, skip one-on-ones, in different ways to try to elicit that qualitative feedback. And then finally, the communication. I think Lisa touched on this. Hey, how we deal with layoffs or recession or any of our large business decisions, that transparency, that communication effort is really important, not only during an event, but after the event. And we do have to foster that sense of trust. And not only the silent quitting, but the silent hiring, which is, hey, we are going to expand a division or launch a new product, and we're looking to bring on some temps, and they may be future employees. So all of these are really big topics, but we're seeing these trends emerge kind of post-pandemic, but also with the recession certainly in play. So I want to throw it over to our panel right here. What are you personally, or what is your teams doing, or what are you seeing in terms of getting feedback or trying to find out needs of the employees?
I mean, I'll say a couple things on the management training. I think we touched on it before, but it's really, really important. I think some people instinctively have a good feel for the right way to manage folks, but they could always be trained better. And some folks I think you really need to work with to give them the tools to be a good manager. And the feedback piece of it is super important. I've been to different companies who have more or less rigorous employee evaluation structures. But to me, anytime I would give an evaluation to an employee, there should be nothing that I say in that evaluation conversation that has not been communicated in the moment, right? It's important to be, this is not I'm sitting here silently evaluating you and you're wondering how you're doing. You should never wonder how you're doing. This should be a real-time feedback so that when you get to your performance review, it's where you stand, and we both have talked about it. So I think that's super important to train managers on how to do that. And we try to do that. As a small company, we've had a less rigorous structure on employee evaluations as we've been going through some of these challenges, but I think most larger companies have kept those in place. On the communication and the survivor syndrome piece, I think we talked about it earlier, but it is important to provide as much information as you can, as you responsibly can, as for that your business will allow you to do. And it's also important, as we do have to say goodbye to colleagues, that we treat them with respect, and that you're shown respect and people are allowed to say goodbye and treated properly. That shows as much about who you are as an organization than anything you do. And while they're still with you, and I've seen a lot of companies. I'll mention Stripe because I have some friends who worked there, and on LinkedIn they were doing posts. These companies who've had to do massive layoffs, saying, "Hey, you should hire some of these folks. They're really good. This wasn't about performance. These are excellent colleagues that for business purposes we had to say goodbye to." And so doing those kinds of things and showing people as they depart, I think is an important piece of developing respect and showing how you treat people. And then I'll say one thing about ERGs, just as a funny story, quickly. When I joined Uber, I was, I'd never known about ERGs. I'd been in government, and they said, oh, you could be, da da da. And then there was something called Uber Stages, and I said, oh, and it was for older employees. And I looked it up, and what was the age group for Uber Stages was above 40. And I was like, wait a minute, this company is very, very young. Now I feel like I'm a sage. I'm only 40. But anyway, I think a lot of team members do really enjoy the work in ERGs. I never really did get active with Uber Stages, but it's just a funny anecdote. Anyway, I'll
love it. Dennis.
Sure. No, those are great thoughts. I'll just add on some thoughts as well. Of course, Microsoft, very large company, over 200,000 employees. So, we have systems in place to do our best to try to get feedback about our teams and our employees. Twice a year, we have a formal program known as Microsoft Signals, where we put together a survey, which we send out to all employees. We ask them to participate in these surveys, and we get information back, and we look at the data and analyze it, and then share that out with folks on our team, learn from that data, and figure out how do we have to sort of course correct, right, to create the strongest culture that we can. We also have twice a year something which we call the Connects, which are sort of like a performance evaluation, if you will, but it's really 2 points during the year where you have really a deep check-in with folks individually on your team to see how are they doing against their commitments, which are set earlier in our fiscal year for each employee. We talk about what have they learned, what have they should be doing differently, what they should be focused on from a career development perspective. So when we have those connect cycles with our teammates as managers, we take that process very seriously. We want to invest in our employees. We obviously want feedback from them. And then, of course, with our employees and teammates, and I know with my team, I'm having periodic one-on-ones with each of my direct reports. From a cadence perspective, I like to have 2 one-on-ones a month with each of my direct reports to check in with them, to see how they're doing, to get a sense as to the work which they're doing, how I can help them, how I can support them, maybe get a sense as to maybe what other areas they want to get involved in, where they can stretch, in which they can grow. Towards the end of each of these one-on-ones, I'm asking my teammates, where I can improve, give me some feedback, give our team leadership, some feedback as well. We want to hear from folks, right? And we want to learn. We have a growth mindset mentality, which is led by our most senior leaders of our company. And, all of us take that mindset mentality to learn, to grow, and hopefully get better. We also, at least from a Microsoft legal team perspective, and we're a pretty large legal department at Microsoft, nearly 2,000 employees. In many respects, we're like a large law firm, but we also have a number of ERGs. As an example, this fiscal year, I'm a co-lead for our Hispanic ERG affinity group. And that's just another great avenue for folks to connect, to learn from each other. We have various different sessions and unique initiatives. Each ERG has an executive sponsor who sort of helps them and to sort of shape some of their activities and events and how to gain more visibility, quite frankly, for their ERG. And, one key point in this and during these tougher economic times is hopefully companies are not losing sight of the importance of diversity and inclusion. From my perspective, it's not just the right thing to do to embrace it, but it's the smart thing to do from a business viewpoint, because we see studies time and time again, which indicates that those teams which are more inclusive in nature are higher performing than those which are less inclusive in nature. And then, of course, from a Microsoft perspective, we have a wide variety of customers and partners that we need to serve. It makes good business sense for our lawyers and our engineers and our salespeople to be diverse and inclusive in their makeup, so that we can serve our customers, our partners, and other stakeholders. So those are a few points, Matt.
That's great. Again, rich topics, and I think you did a good job. We could talk for a long time on these. Great thoughts. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so here's some more nuts and bolts. How are we valuing employees? And before we even get into this is again another hour topic, because we see a lot of interesting things coming up. Here are the themes that we're seeing: large, mid-market, and large enterprise, all the way down to our very smallest. More types in the frequency of appreciation. So we're seeing more on the peer-to-peer, and beyond sales, we're seeing incentives and monthly service awards across divisions. We're seeing different channels. So we're using LinkedIn or Slack or social media to say thanks. We're seeing more events related to how can we engage employees. Right now, we're a platform that does recognition and events. We have lots of businesses running March Madness, and we're doing it across companies or across divisions. And we see that in holidays or volunteer events, and we see a lot of those type of engagement events being done. And then finally, the digitization of some of this. The bigger you are, you do have more processes in place, but we see people trying to put these processes in place to allow employee-driven type of groups. In addition to that, as you can see from the buttons, a whole array of expanded non-traditional benefits. So around mindfulness, different types of PTO, flexible work schedule, all of those are in the mix today. as we try to adjust, hey, based on what our employees are saying, how do we fit that bill? So I'm gonna skip to the next one, and then we'll certainly come back to our panel. But I just want to wrap this up and leave a few 10 minutes here for some of the questions. So I want to talk about, well, what is occurring in terms of recession-proofing your organization? How do we codify some of what our panelists have said? So if we move on to the next slide, acknowledge there's a disconnect between what we're seeing as leadership in most organizations and what our employees want. And what our employees are saying today is, I want to be recognized, I want to belong, and I want to have that knowledge for work done. And sometimes that's disconnected with, we ask our management team or our leadership team, are you recognizing employees? Of course we are. We do this and this and this. That may be different from what our employees are saying. And the next slide. And then on the rewards, and why do we see rewards? Well, awards, those used to be, hey, anniversary gifts or a plaque at the end every 2-3 years, right? That's out. What's in? Digital, flexible rewards, virtual team building, online perks, wellness points. And does that matter? It does. It's not something you want to give out as a trophy for, hey, you did your job. That shouldn't be an award. But can we create those events, or the photography committee or the ERG group that did something? Sure. And we have some creative awards. So that's what we're seeing. And if we go on the next slide. So this is the bottom line. What are we seeing as a growing predictors of job satisfaction? So the data and the qualitative and quantitative says, hey, we need flexibility as an employee today. We need recognition. We want responsibility and that bit of challenge, opportunity for growth, sense of belonging, and then I've got a belief in the company. And we as managers, but also as a company, can put in the time to address these predictors. Next slide. Okay, so what is this recognition loop? We touched on it a bit. First one, and I've already been texted here a couple different times, how do we get that exec buy-in? That's important. People leave because of their managers, right? It's got to come from the top. Usually we see the data behind what's going on in terms of the retention and the impact. You got to get the exec buy-in. We train up the leadership. We keep things fresh and seek constant feedback. That's a job whether it's HR or in the business leadership side, we can impact that. And then we got to recognize more and measure because it's changing. And last slide. Great. So the new employee checklist: culture, autonomy, growth opportunities, flexibility, purpose, and recognition. Those that are engaged, it's a 2x, 2 to 3x. And our final slide. So to win the marketplace, you got to win the workplace. So let's close there. And I want to get to, I know we've been getting inundated with employee questions. So let's go ahead and Ben, I'll hand it over to you if you want to start with what the audience is seeing.
Yeah, thank you. We've had a couple questions come in. The first question that came in is, what is the most impactful change you have made to working with your hybrid team?
Lisa, you want to take that one first, or Dennis?
Well, I'm sorry. I think I just think nowadays I'm more purposeful with my one-on-ones with my teammates, and I make sure that we're maybe a few years ago I wasn't having as many one-on-ones with folks on my team, not for the purpose of micromanaging them, of course, but just to check in with them to see how they're doing. And I feel like nowadays I am checking in more often with folks who are on my team. I'm also, I think, checking in not just with folks on my team, but also other colleagues, business clients. I feel I've become more purposeful in recognizing that it's important to stay connected, and it's easy in this distributed environment where we're relying so much on technology, where we're not as well connected as we ought to be. It's kind of ironic because in some respects, technology should make us better connected, but I still think the human element of connecting and checking in, seeing how I can help them, how we can help each other. I think this notion also of making sure that we're not in our silos. It's easy to get in our silos in our teams. And so how do we become more purposeful in sharing content and information to our teammates, or learnings and best practices to make them better, I think is also very important. I found myself doing more of that over the last few years than what I was doing previously.
I think that one of the things that I do when I run team meetings, which probably didn't do it as much in a live environment, but I always encourage the pre-meeting chatter to go on a little longer than you normally would in person. And we kind of do the same thing on the back end. It's where people talk like you would if you're walking out of a meeting in an office, like, oh, tell me about how was that thing you did this weekend or whatever. You don't have the chance to do that. That kind of connectivity where you're just rocking around the office and talking to people about some plans they had or what their kid was doing, you don't get to do that. And so I kind of encourage the chatter at the beginning of the meeting, and I kind of, I fuel it, and at the end as well, just because it's the only time that people get to do that. Sometimes they're sitting at home by themselves all day. So that's one thing. Not that I was an autocrat about meetings before, but I've gotten a little more flexible. And then the other thing that I do, and again, we're not hybrid, we are completely remote, is that you're sitting on calls, video calls all day, and it can be a lot. Sometimes when I check in with somebody, I do an old-fashioned phone call. It just sometimes, now that we're so used to the video, it gives people a little more breathing room just to talk to you, as opposed to, like looking, and if you were in person, maybe that would, be better or different. But to me, sometimes when I need to be able to have a tough conversation or just give somebody room to breathe and break something down, I do it on the phone, and it seems to help. So
yeah, what's old is new again, right? The idea of sending out a handwritten note to an employee or a coworker adds a lot of weight that it might not have used to a couple of years ago. We actually got the reverse question of that came in. So what are you seeing not working, and how is that evolving how you drive employee engagement?
Well, I'll touch upon a point I think Lisa made earlier about the importance of transparency. And I like to, when I connect with some folks on my team, when we have team meetings, I'm saying, all right, well, I'm going to be engaging in some real talk here. Okay. So we've got the attorney-client privilege emotion here, and this is just for us, for the benefit of, several of us, on the call, basically. But I think what my view, which do not work, is too many people stuck in sort of corporate speak, and not maybe coming across real and authentic. I mean, I'm a little old school in this, but I do like the leaders who seem very approachable, who are authentic, who are sort of telling it like it is and being real and being as open as they can. There may be some things, of course, which they cannot share with you and is super sensitive and confidential. But I do think as leaders, we owe it to our teammates to be as transparent and open and honest as we can. And I just don't like folks who seem to be hiding behind the corporate speak and, aren't being real and authentic. And I gravitate to those folks who do that. I think we owe it to folks on our team. And I think if you come across real, honest, and open and transparent, you're going to earn more trust and psychological safety with your teammates.
Agree.
I've received two different questions via text. I'm not even sure how they got my number, but they're similar, so I'm going to ask them. And that is, for those of us in HR, how do we get budget, or how do we get buy-in from executive teams for engagement?
I mean, I would just take the stats that you put up there about productivity and the value of an engaged employee and what it means for, there's there's two ways to appeal this, right? One is the benefits to the human beings that you work with in the community that is your colleagues and your work environment, and it's just a good thing to do. But the other way is to say that it is better for our business. It's meaningful to our business and our bottom line and how we serve our customers to have engaged employees. And here's the data and the stats about what an engaged employee means, how much more productive they are, and from a, companies going through very, very difficult economic times in some ways, I would say you can't afford not to do this. You need to get every bit of productivity and contribution that you can from employees right now. So you can't afford not to do it.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, if you have information and data to show what you think is going to be the return on investment, the ROI of these sort of in-person connections or meetings, I think that's or events, that's really important. But I think it comes down to trust. I mean, we talk a lot about earning the trust of our customers and our partners. And I think even before you do that, you have to earn the trust of your teammates, right? How do you build that culture and that trust first? And then if you're able to do that, then you're going to be better positioned to earn trust with external stakeholders.
Well, we have other questions that have come in. We will make sure we respond to those individually to the folks that we weren't able to get to. We are getting close to the top of the hour, so we need to end it right there. I want to thank all of our panelists for their time today. Very interesting discussion, and we look forward to more webinars here in the future. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we will be sending this out to everybody virtually, and then we will follow up with each of you to make sure we answer any questions. So thank you all for joining today, and we very much appreciate you participating with Advantage Club today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Ben.